So you probably know the story of Abraham, or Abram, pretty well. But today, we're going to look at it through a completely different lens, the eyes of a 17th century mystic named Madame Guyon. For her, this wasn't just ancient history, it was a spiritual map. She saw Abram's entire life as this epic battle between two ways of living, the path of complete faith versus the path of human logic. It's a really fascinating take, so let's dive in.
Okay, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at a choice Abram makes that defines him. Then, we'll see him at his absolute peak, in a moment of pure, mind-blowing faith. But of course, from there, we'll watch as doubt starts to creep in, and that leads to a decision with consequences that, well, are still echoing today. So let's kick things off with these two guys at a fork in the road, Abram and his nephew, Lot. The choice they make right here sets the whole stage for everything else. What's so cool here is how Guyon totally reframes this story. See, this isn't just about two guys dividing up land. She says Abram's choice is all about obedience to God, and because of that, he gets peace. But Lot? He splits off for his own gain, picking what looks like the best piece of property. And where does that lead him? Straight into war and getting captured. For Guyon, the message is crystal clear. When you separate from what's right for your own selfish reasons, you're just asking for trouble. So Lot settles down in Sodom, which seems like the perfect spot, right? It's prosperous, it looks secure. But Guyon says this city is really just a symbol for any life we build on our own logic and on material things. Lot thinks he's safe, but she argues he's actually in way more danger because that whole foundation is totally unstable. And boom, sure enough, the minute war breaks out, that false security just crumbles and he gets taken.
All right, let's move on and catch Abram in a moment of just absolute spiritual clarity. This is what Guyon calls pure faith. You really have to picture this scene to get it. Abram is a total hero. He's just rescued his nephew, he's defeated 4 kings. The king of Sodom basically owes him everything and offers him all the loot from the war. And Abram's response is just stunning. He refuses every last bit of it, right down to a single thread, so that no one can ever say, "I'm the one who made Abram rich." And this isn't about being proud or just turning down money. What Guyon sees here is a soul that is completely abandoned to God. It's a soul that is actively saying no to any support system that isn't God himself. Its value, its wealth, its entire reason for being, all of it is found only in God. For her, this is the absolute summit of faith. And check out what happens next. The result is immediate. God responds to this total, radical trust, not by offering a bunch of stuff, but with the deepest promise you can imagine. He doesn't say, "I'll give you a reward." He says, "I am your reward." That's the incredible trade-off Guyon is pointing to. You let go of all the little things you're clinging to, and in return, you get God himself. Just, wow.
But, even a hero of faith can stumble. And now we see the story take a turn, as the long, silent wait for God's promise to come true starts to wear Abram down. So, years have passed. Years. Abram is old, he still doesn't have a son, and that divine promise is starting to feel pretty far off. So his human brain kicks into gear. He shifts from pure trust to practical problem solving. He basically says to God, "Well, since you haven't given me a son, I guess my servant Eliezer will have to do." He's starting to make his own backup plans. So God reassures him, tells him he will have a son of his own, and then Abram asks this question. And this is the moment you can see the crack forming in his faith. He's not just resting in the promise anymore. Now he's asking for a sign. He wants proof. He wants to know for sure, which is a totally human thing to do. But for Guyon, it's a huge step away from pure faith. The Bible says that right after he asks for a sign, a great darkness falls on him. Guyon argues this is no coincidence at all. This darkness is the direct spiritual result of his doubt. It's the internal weather that moves in when you stop trusting and start demanding proof. This really gets to the core of Guyon's whole teaching. For her, asking for a sign is the exact opposite of faith. It's you trying to grab the steering wheel from God. And she says the result is instant. It's like you slam the door on grace and light, and all that's left to rush in is fear, hesitation, and that spiritual darkness. And all of this brings us to our final part, where that little seed of doubt just explodes into a full-on plan. A plan driven by nothing but human effort and impatience. Sarai, she's old, she's childless, and she is just done waiting. So she comes up with what probably seemed like a perfectly logical solution. She tells Abram, "Look, God's not making this happen. Go sleep with my maid, Hagar, and we'll build a family through her. And Abram agrees. They decide they're going to help God out.
Okay, this is where Guyon's interpretation gets so good. She takes this whole family soap opera and says it's really an allegory for what goes on inside our own souls. For her, Abram is that higher part of us, the part that's trying to have faith. Sarai, she's the lower, impatient part of us, that voice that just gets tired of waiting. Hagar represents all of our busy, complicated human plans. And their son, Ishmael, he is the conflict and strife that always come from those plans.
And this one decision kicks off this totally predictable, disastrous chain reaction. It starts with impatience. That impatience leads to a clever human plan. But the second that plan starts to work, the moment Hagar gets pregnant, it creates immediate contempt and conflict in the house. And this isn't just a temporary problem. It creates a legacy of strife that echoes for generations.
So we're left with this really stark choice. On one side, you have the way of faith, represented by Sarai, who is barren. It looks slow, it feels empty, maybe it even looks like a failure. But it's the only path that leads to Isaac, the child of God's promise. On the other side, you have the way of human effort, Hagar. It looks busy, it looks clever, and it looks like it's working right away. But its end result is Ishmael, a legacy of conflict. And that's really the question that Guyon leaves us with, isn't it? It forces us to look at our own lives, our careers, our relationships, everything, and ask, where am I tired of waiting? Where have I chosen my own Hagar, my own clever plan? Because the quiet path of faith just feels too slow and uncertain. It's a question that takes this story from thousands of years ago and makes it feel like it was written this morning.